slides.
Everybody, if you need to say something, just unmute yourself. Okay, there we go. And now let's get rid of that. Okay, well, welcome everybody to the last class. I will share my screen and we will get started. Share screen, Microsoft PowerPoint. Slideshow. Okay, there we go. So we are starting off with a little bit of things that came up last week. Follow up. Someone was talking about crossing the Harry Nice Bridge, which goes from Charles County to Virginia, and how old and rickety it is and how they're building a new one. Well, they actually started work on it July of last year. It is scheduled to open in early 2023, and it will have 4 lanes instead of the current 2 on the current bridge. And they have added something to the name. There is a state senator from Charles County named Thomas Middleton, and so it is going to be the Harry Nice Thomas Middleton Bridge from now on when it reopens. Also, someone asked about whether bottlenose dolphins live in the ocean, as they have been seen, we said, in the lower Potomac River. And they are actually quite widespread. They live in both temperate and tropical waters and in oceans and tidal rivers all around the world. So it's a very common, I was going to say fish, but they're not fish, they're mammals. So today the topic is rivers of Western Maryland. And when we finish with that, we're going to have a special presentation from one of our classmates about rivers. So we've seen this map before, but it always helps to look at it before you think about where things are in Maryland. So where is Western Maryland? Well, it is generally, some people call it the mountain side of Maryland. And there are 3 mountain provinces, the Blue Ridge, the easternmost, the Ridge and Valley, and then the westernmost is the Appalachian Plateaus, as it says here. So the rivers we're going to be looking at are all in this section of Maryland. We talked about the Potomac last week, and of course, the upper Potomac is this part of Western Maryland. And we're also going to talk about the Monocacy, which is right here, which is in the Piedmont, but it's in Frederick County, and Frederick County is kind of, some people consider it part of Western Maryland. So the rivers that flow into the Potomac tend to be in pairs, one north flowing more or less south and one south flowing more or less north. And here is a map with some topography in it showing the mountain provinces. You can see the Blue Ridge has a couple of very steep ridges. They are the, well, we'll talk about them when we get there. Then the Ridge and Valley has 2 parts, the Great Valley on the east, and then the Ridge and Valley section on the west. And then this is the Allegheny Plateau. And this map shows the topography with the county boundaries. So you can see this is Frederick County here, and this is the Monocacy, and this is the Blue Ridge portion of Frederick County. And then this is the Ridge and Valley, and then this is the Appalachian Plateau, which is all of Garrett County and a little bit of Allegheny County on the eastern end. And we'll go over that later, but I just thought this map was very helpful, putting everything, topographic in context.
Judy, could you possibly put the last map up for a moment? I was trying to get a picture of it.
This one?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
okay. Yeah, right, because this one doesn't show the provinces. Right. But you can
Got
see
it.
it doesn't have the county boundary, so if you put the two together, you kind of get a different picture. So the Monocacy watershed is very large. It starts up in Pennsylvania in Adams County. Gettysburg is part of it, one of the tributaries. And it is in the Piedmont province, but it's close to the Blue Ridge. And some of the tributaries that flow into it on the western side actually have their headwaters up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So that would be some of these streams on the western side of the river. This is the main stem of the river. And one interpretation of the name Monocacy is that it is a word from a Shawnee language, and it means river with many bends. And if you look at this map, it is very clear where it might have gotten that name. This is the river, and it goes like that and like all the way up into Pennsylvania. And a lot of the tributaries also seem to have bends in them. So the valley of the Monocacy River was agricultural. And by the end of the 18th century, it had 870 grist mills along the river and its tributaries. So they were corn and wheat that was grown in the area. But now there's only one of these mills left. It has been converted into offices. It is in Buckingstown, Maryland, and it is called Michael's Mill. And of course, there's a lot of old mills, much bigger ones in the Baltimore area, but old mills are, nice looking structures, and they make good, converting them into other uses often works pretty well. So this is one of them. So we talked about how the state has scenic river designations, and the Monocacy was one of them. And here is a sign that announces that it is a scenic river and that it has a citizens advisory board. It also has a management plan, which the scenic rivers all have. And as you can see by this picture, it's fairly flat. It's very popular for canoe and kayak trips. And here's a picture of some people kayaking on the Monocacy. You can see that this is very flat water. And also, like a number of other rivers in Maryland, you can get a water trail map book that will show you places where you can launch a boat and places where you need to portage, and also landmarks along the river, one of which is the Monocacy National Battlefield, which is a Civil War site. And this brochure is a joint effort, if you look at the bottom, of the Maryland Department of Natural Resources and the Frederick County Parks and Rec Department. And it also mentions at the bottom of the picture that this is the river with many bends. So the Monocacy flows past the city of Frederick, and Frederick uses it for both water supply and discharge from its wastewater treatment plant. And it should be obvious, but it's worth mentioning that when you do both of these on a river, you want to locate your water supply intake upstream from your wastewater discharge. And that's what they do. So at the end of the river, where it flows into the Potomac, we've seen this picture before. This is the aqueduct that carries the C&O Canal over the river. The Monocacy River is down here on flowing under the aqueduct. And it's just above where the river flows into the Potomac. So again, we'll look at this map just west of the Monocacy watershed, or actually a little bit of it is probably in the Blue Ridge because some of the headwaters of some of their tributaries are here. But this is the Blue Ridge province. It's at the western end of Frederick and the eastern end of Washington counties. It's only about 10 miles wide in Maryland, but further south, it's much wider. In North Carolina, the Blue Ridge is a good part of the western part of the state. And there are the two major ridges in Maryland are the Catoctin Mountain up here and South Mountain down here. And in between, in the Middletown Valley, is the Catoctin Creek, which is a tributary to the Potomac. So that is what is in the Blue Ridge province in terms of waterways. And going west, the Ridge and Valley province is actually both of these, the area marked Great Valley and the area marked Ridge and Valley. This is considered part of the Ridge and Valley province. It includes most of Washington and most of Allegheny counties. And the ridges and valleys, which alternate, you have let's see here, you have a ridge and a valley, a ridge and a valley, and so on, run northeast to southwest. And the widest valley in the province is the Hagerstown Valley, also called the Great Valley, and that's here. And here, if you are coming west in Maryland on one of the major highways, you will probably come to a scene like this when you are about to cross the Great Valley. It drops quite steeply, and it is wide and flat. And the Great Valley is actually part of a long, wide valley that runs from north to south, also northeast to southwest. And it is known in Virginia as the Shenandoah Valley. It is the Cumberland Valley in Pennsylvania, and it runs down at least into Tennessee, and the highway I-81 follows the route of the Great Valley. So you've probably been there one way or another. The main tributary to the Potomac in the Hagerstown Valley is the Antietam Creek. And one of the sites on this creek is Burnside's Bridge. That's the creek. It crosses the creek. And this was the scene of a major Civil War battle, the Battle of Antietam, in September of 1862. And the bridge is named for the Union general, Ambrose Burnside. It is part of Antietam National Battlefield, and it's a pedestrian bridge now. You can cross it on foot. So here is the general for whom it is named, Ambrose Burnside. So the natural pattern of roads in the Ridge and Valley is to follow the valleys from north to south. So when you want a road going east-west, like we have a couple of major roads in Maryland, they have to cut across the mountains. And sometimes this creates spectacular road cuts, and this is one of them. This is the Sidling Hill Road Cut. It is where I-68 cuts through Sidling Hill, and it is 364 feet deep from the road to the top of the hill. It is sedimentary rock, meaning they are in layers. The oldest rock is at the bottom and the youngest rock is at the top. But the oldest rock is 345 million years old and the youngest is 320 million years old. So this is a very old formation. And there's actually a place where you can stop and park and a walkway to get if you want to really get a good look at this quite amazing formation. There used to be a visitor center there also with a museum that told about the local geology, but they closed it a few years ago, and they moved it to the Hancock Museum, which is in Hancock, Maryland, in the C&O Canal Park. So the museum's still there, but it's not at Sidling Hill anymore. And the major stream in this area is Sidling Hill Creek. And this is a map of the wildlife management area. This is state-owned land along Sidling Hill Creek, and the creek flows down from Pennsylvania, again, into the Potomac. It's about 25 miles long. And the land is mostly forested and undeveloped. And that's why the state has bought some of the land. It is described as one of Maryland's healthiest stream systems. It has very high water quality and supports a variety of aquatic life. And it even has some rare plants, of which this is one. It doesn't look like much, but it is. This is the world's healthiest population of a globally rare aquatic wildflower called Harperella. And it is the clear water in the stream that makes this possible to grow here. So the state has some protected land along Sidling Hill Creek. And there is another piece of property. The state's wildlife management area is 3,100 acres. And another 700 acres or so are owned by the Nature Conservancy, a nonprofit, Sidling Hill Creek Nature Preserve. And on the trails in this preserve, they have an audio tour that you can download. And it has 16 different stops that describe what you're looking at while you're walking along the trails. And this, again, is where the C&O Canal crosses Sidling Hill Creek. It's much narrower than the Monocacy. As you can see, the aqueduct is much smaller, much shorter. And this is, again, just above where the creek flows into the Potomac River. And Sidling Hill Creek is the boundary between Washington and Allegheny counties. So the largest community in Western Maryland, west of Frederick, is the city of Cumberland, again, on the Potomac. It's the county seat of Allegheny County. And this is the bridge over the north branch of the Potomac that if you cross it, you are in Ridgely, West Virginia. And again, this is a picture of Cumberland on the Maryland side of the bridge. So going west from Cumberland, you come to the Allegheny Plateau. This is Maryland's westernmost geological province. It's a tableland that has been cut down by rivers into narrow gorges. And as I said, it includes all of Garrett County and a sliver of the western end of Allegheny County. And the eastern boundary of the plateau is called the Allegheny Front. So this is actually a reservoir damming the Savage River. The Savage River is the westernmost major river in the Potomac River watershed in Maryland. The area around the river is Savage River State Forest, and this is a large tract of land owned by the state. It had been cut over for lumbering, like much of Western Maryland, and the state bought it and allowed the forest to regenerate. So it is now a state forest with hiking and biking trails, boat launches, cross-country skiing, campsites, fishing, flat water canoeing, hunting, snowmobiling, and whitewater canoeing. And we'll get to that in a minute. The Savage River was dammed by the Corps of Engineers, the Army Corps of Engineers in 1952, and this is the reservoir it created. And we mentioned this when we were talking about the Potomac, but the plan of the Corps of Engineers was to have a lot of dams all up and down the Potomac and its tributaries, but in the end, they only built 2 because people wanted the waterways to be kept for recreational purposes. So this is a reservoir that has waters feeding into it from undisturbed forests. And there is a website I found called lakelubber.com. Describe this as, quote, fresh, crystal clear mountain water. It supports a large fish population, and the organization called Trout Unlimited ranks it as one of the top fishing waters in the country. There is also a state park at the upper end of the reservoir called Big Run State Park. So again, below the dam on the Savage River, the river drops very steeply, so it's very good for whitewater rafting as well as adventurous canoeing and kayaking. This is somebody running the whitewater on the Savage River, and the Maryland map calls this stretch of the river the Savage River Rapids. One more thing about the Upper Potomac. At the Jennings-Randolph Dam, there is a trail going from the parking lot at the top of the dam down to the river. It's about a mile long, and it was fairly recently named for Senator Paul Sarbanes. So now, continuing west, we are crossing the Eastern Continental Divide. That is the yellowish line on this map, which is hydrological divides of North America. And you can see all the different, basically different directions that rivers flow. Some flow north into the Arctic, some flow west into the Pacific, or south into the Gulf of Mexico, or east into the Atlantic Ocean. Well, one corner of Maryland is in the is west of this continental divide, subcontinental divide, I guess. It is in Garrett County, and Backbone Mountain is at the southern end, and Meadow Mountain is toward the northern end. So anything west of this divide flows into the Mississippi River system and to the Gulf of Mexico eventually. There is a bike ride you can take from Washington, D.C. to Pittsburgh. The first part is riding the C&O Canal towpath to Cumberland, and then you get on a trail system called the Great Allegheny Passage along the valley of the Youghiogheny River, which we'll talk about. And this is, here's another look at the Eastern Continental Divide. Runs something like that. Whoops. So these river systems are flowing north, and everything else in Maryland is flowing south into the Potomac. But these are flowing toward Pennsylvania.
Judy?
Yeah.
I was wondering, where is the Savage River or that area, the Savage area land is, I see Garrett County. Is it part in that area?
Let's see, it's on this, here, 7. Can you see 7 on the map? Here
Yes,
so
thank you.
River is here. This is the reservoir. And then this would be the part where the white water is flowing into the Potomac.
Thank you.
And that's actually in Garrett County, but it's at the eastern end of Garrett. This is the county line here between Garrett and Allegheny counties.
Thank you.
Okay. So here are some people crossing the Eastern Continental Divide on the Great Allegheny Passage. And when you cross it, you follow the Youghiogheny to the Monongahela and eventually to Pittsburgh. So there are basically two major rivers flowing north in Garrett County. One is the Castleman and one is the It was one of the first major bridges on the National Road, which was the road west. It was built in 1813. And at the time, it was the longest single-span stone arch in the country. And of course, there were skeptics who were sure it would collapse when they took the supports away, but it didn't. And it supported many stagecoaches and covered wagons that crossed it, going from Cumberland to the western frontier. Today, it's a National Historic Landmark, and it's only for pedestrian traffic. And it has its own state park, the Castleman River State Park, which is 4 acres and probably the smallest state park in Maryland. It's actually Castleman River Bridge State Park. That's the name. So the park includes the bridge, a parking lot, and access to the Castleman River down here, which people use for fishing. So the bigger river on the western side of the divide is the Youghiogheny. And you can see where it's going. This is the portion in Maryland. This is the Monongahela, and they join here. And at Pittsburgh, the Monongahela joins the Allegheny to become the Ohio River. And if you follow the Ohio River, you will eventually get to the Mississippi River. So the word Youghiogheny is a word from the Algonquin language, and it means something like stream flowing in a contrary direction, which, you know, if you're used to streams going into the Potomac, that makes sense. And people also sometimes call this river the Yacht, because it's got a very long name, hard to pronounce. During the colonial period and in the early years of the United States, this river valley was an important access route through the mountains for both settlers and military forces, going from Virginia to, and of course, this was all Virginia then, it's now West Virginia, to Western Pennsylvania and on into the Ohio country. In 1754, George Washington, who was then a militia officer of the British colony of Virginia, followed the river in an attempt to find a water route to Fort Duquesne, which at that time was held by the French at what is now Pittsburgh. So here is what the yacht looks like, part of it anyway. And one section of the river has falls and rapids with a drop in elevation of 280 feet in 4 miles, which is quite a lot. And that makes it good for whitewater rafting. It has class 4 and 5 whitewater rapids, which are the 2 highest classes of difficulty. And it's used for whitewater practice by teams, including the Olympic whitewater rafters. So this is a state park in on the Youghiogheny, and it's called Swallow Falls. It's a very beautiful place. It has hiking trails along the river, campsites, and some beautiful waterfalls. This is one of them called Muddy Falls. It's the highest waterfall in this park and one of the highest in Maryland. It is 53 feet high. And so one of the tributaries of the Youghiogheny is a stream called Deep Creek. Well, in 1924, the Pennsylvania Power and Light Company created a dam on Deep Creek to create hydroelectricity. And this is the result, Deep Creek Lake. And this map shows you the typical branching pattern created when rivers are dammed to make reservoirs. And we saw a map that looks something like this of the Loch Raven Reservoir. It's the largest inland body of water in Maryland, because Maryland has no natural lakes, and it has 65 miles of shoreline. The state of Maryland bought it in 2000, but they still use the dam to produce electricity. but they do have a state park along the lake called Deep Creek Lake State Park. This is the swimming beach in the park. This lake is very important in the Garrett County economy because many people, as you know, come there for their summer vacations. They use the lake for swimming and boating and fishing and water skiing. And the lake is also a place people visit at other times of year. This is what it looks like in autumn. People come out to look at the foliage, and it has winter sports, including ice fishing and snowmobile races in the winter on the lake. So that is the Youghiogheny. But another important part of this part of Western Maryland was the coal economy. This is a map of the Upper Potomac coal field. And you can see all the towns along the river that were places where they mined, well, miners lived and where they shipped coal out and so on, in the days when coal was an active part of the economy. Most of these towns were company towns, and when the mines closed, the companies abandoned the towns, and there are remnants of them still left with old train tracks and building foundations and overgrown vegetation. But one of the coal towns on the river, and you can see it here, Kitzmiller, is still around. It's on the Potomac, on the North Branch, and this is what it looks like. It is a little upstream from Jennings Randolph Lake, and it is where Maryland Route 38 crosses the river. It had a population in 2020 of 299 people, but at one time it was one of the largest producers and shippers of coal in Garrett County. And it has one restaurant in town now called the Coal Bucket. Here is a sign for the town. Welcome to Kitzmiller, Maryland. It was not a company town, which probably accounts for the fact that it's still there. People owned their own houses instead of renting company houses. So they had an investment to keep, and some of them stayed there after the mines closed. Well, one of the lasting effects of the now closed coal mines is acid mine drainage. I saw this picture last week from, again, abandoned coal mines. It's called AMD for short. And the water from these mines is high in sulfur and creates acidic conditions that kill fish and other aquatic life. This has been a problem in the North Branch of the Potomac, as well as rivers throughout Western Maryland and also in other parts of Appalachia. So AMD pollution has not been eliminated in the Potomac watershed, but they have developed methods for treating it. And one is called lime dosers. These are machines that add lime to neutralize the acid in the water. And in 1993, they were placed at several sites in the North Branch watershed. And by 1994, it had improved water quality in the river in the North Branch so that there was actually fish life there again. And this is considered a temporary fix while they're trying to find more permanent solutions. But this is a before and after picture of the same stream with acid mine drainage water and remediated water. We also saw that another way of improving water quality in the North Branch was below the dam to control the release of water from the lake. There are certain layers of water that are lower in acidity than other layers, and by controlling what they release below the dam, they can make it less acid. Before the dam was built, the North Branch in this area had virtually no aquatic life. And now, with the lime dosers and the dams, it supports fishing. including trout fishing, but I don't think it's this kind of trout. It's probably brown trout. This is a trout that is native to Maryland. The habitat that it needs to live in and reproduce are clear, cold streams. So the presence of brook trout it's like a canary in the coal mine. It's an indicator that a stream is clean. And this is a guide to Maryland trout fishing. This is like the cover, part of the cover. Or maybe it's a review of the book. Likely to be regarded as the Bible for trout fishing in the state of Maryland. Well, there are about 100 streams in the state that have native self-supporting populations of brook trout. Many of them are in Garrett County, some are in central and northern Baltimore County, and some are in the Catoctin Mountains. But Maryland Department of Natural Resources has been doing ongoing monitoring of streams, and they found that there are fewer streams supporting brook trout than there were 30 years ago. They documented the loss of brook trout in several streams in central Maryland. And in every case, what they found was the losses of the trout coincided with urban development. And what they found was that when the pavement covered more than 5% of the drainage area of a stream, it would typically be enough to eradicate brook trout. And I found this on the DNR website. So, you know, unless we keep areas like the Savage River Forest undeveloped, this is going to be a continuing problem. So that's a survey of Western Maryland. Before we go on to the next part of today's class, I just wanted to show you some suggestions how to help keep your local stream and the Chesapeake Bay cleaner. And there are a lot of different things you can do. And what I'm going to be sending out an email sometime this week with a book list and reference to the YouTube channels where you can find, you know, the recordings of my classes. And I will include this list in it, so you don't have to make quick notes while you're looking at this at this screen. But you know, there's a lot of little things you can do. I mean, one of the things I like to do is walk around my neighborhood and pick up trash. You know, every piece of plastic you pick up from the street does not end up in the Chesapeake Bay eventually. So anyway, we will stop for any questions before we go on. Mary Lee?
There is one comment from Michael Baker. The U.S. Olympic kayak team often trains on the Savage, and Olympic trials have been there.
Oh, okay.
Okay, they do a release of water from the dam to make the river meet Olympic standards.
Okay.
Okay.
They probably do that on the Youghiogheny too. I didn't talk about that, but they do have a regular dam release above the whitewater part of the Yough also. So maybe for the same reason. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
That's it.
You know, they're one of the reasons the Olympic kayakers live in the Washington area is because they can have pretty good jobs and also get a lot of good practice in. Apparently the Savage is meets Olympic standards with the with the release of water. But I lived in the Washington area for a long time, and every now and then we'd see an article on excuse me, in the Post or on TV about when we have a really heavy rainfall. The first thing the kayakers in the DC area do is they go off on the Potomac and kayak over the Great Falls.
Oh, Wow.
Much to the chagrin of the park police.
Why is that not,
But
is
but they
that not
don't,
allowed, or why, what's the problem with the park police?
well, it's,
High liability for drowning.
it's a safety issue.
Well, I mean, that's true of the Savage River too, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Great Falls.
Nice.
But the kayakers don't care. They'll go down and they'll have somebody to pick them up
Right,
at the bottom and then drive them back up and do it again for a while. So
right. And I guess one thing I didn't mention is that up by the Yakuagani, there are outfitters that will provide you with kayaks and a guide to take you through the whitewater and then presumably pick you up at the other end. Yeah.
yeah, I've been on one of those. I got pretty wet.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, we're going to go on. And I am going to I'm going to get out of my share screen and turn the class over to Deborah Slauson, who will tell you what she is going to talk about. Stop share. Here we go. Okay, Deborah, it's all yours.
Yep. Hold on.
Should I mute myself?
Hold on. Let's see here.
Are you having trouble screen sharing?
I'm just having too many screens up here. Hold on for a sec. I just need to get back to the
You have a share screen icon at the bottom?
no, I have that. No, that's not the problem.
Oh.
Hold on. I'm going to come out of that. And I'm going to this and aha. Nah, oh no. Here it is. All right. Hold on for a sec. Let me see if I can get this to a slideshow. Beginning. Okay. Are you seeing ones with notes and stuff on it, or?
Yeah, you don't have the slideshow up.
Yeah. Wait a sec. Hold on.
You have to click on slideshow and then,
Yeah. No, I did that. But it's needing to see another screen. Hold on.
Huh.
Let me see. I'm going to stop sharing here for a sec. And I'm going to try again. Aha, I found it. Yeah. It's a miracle. Now you're seeing just a
Yeah.
slide.
that's good.
Okay. Hi, my name is Deborah Slauson, and I've been with RI for a couple seasons now, a couple semesters. I want to give you a presentation that's part science and part history of Baltimore County and the Gunpowder Falls River. Okay, come on. This is supposed to be mirroring this. It doesn't seem to be mirroring it. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Okay. I think I got it worked out now. The first thing I want to talk is a little bit how rivers work in general. Rivers are essentially transport systems. They transport water, obviously. They transport sediment. They transport everything that falls into the river. And they also transport nutrients, which is another way of looking at transporting energy within the food web, or trophic levels of who eats whom. So this is a cartoon that shows the flow of energy in what's called the river continuum by a guy named Van Oort. Came up with this idea, but it's been very widely adopted. And so whatever starts in the headwaters of the stream here, the energy and the nutrients all flow downstream. So anytime I put an ecological discontinuity, in other words, a blockage in the stream, I disrupt this flow. For instance, up at the top here, what you have is a lot of what is known as allochthonous material or coarse particulate matter. So it's all the leaves and branches and stuff that fall into the stream. And there's a whole bunch of little guys, macroinvertebrates of various kinds, that like to eat that. And this is how they appear proportionally. There are several kinds of macroinvertebrates, collectors, grazers, shredders, and predators. Did I say grazers? Yes. And they process all that leaf litter and stuff that falls in, and they get their nutrients out of it. And then what they don't eat is passed down in a more eatable form to the next group downstream. And as you go downstream, the stream is going to get wider, less steep, and have actually greater discharge as tributaries come in. And so then if you look at the second one down here, you can see the proportions of types of macroinvertebrates have changed. Okay, before we had lots of collectors. We still have a few collectors, but we had almost no grazers the first time, and now we got lots of grazers. And they're going to eat algae and stuff off of rocks, etc. And then as you go further, further down, you get to really where it's quite wide and slow, and the water's also going to warm up as it goes south. I mean, goes downstream, because you don't have the kind of you have a lot of more opening in area to the sun, and slower water. So there you're going to get a lot of collectors. Most of them will be collectors, and there'll be a few predators. Predators get more numerous as you go downstream, generally speaking. But energy flow happens in 3 different directions. It happens longitudinally, which is what we just talked to, the upstream to downstream. It also actually that's more the plan form. It goes longitudinally from the stream bed up to the surface of the water. And there's a lot of exchanges of energy and nutrients between the stream bed and the groundwater system, so that there has to be connection there. So you don't want to have any impediments. As soon as you pave the stream bed, then you have ruined the longitudinal connectivity. If you put a dam in the stream, you wreck the plant form continuity. If you harden the stream banks with concrete, maybe to prevent erosion or something, you have disrupted the lateral continuity, because the stream needs access to its floodplains. There's a lot of these little animals that live part of their life in wetlands and on damp floodplains. And then when they're big and tough and strong, they can move out into the stream and protect themselves and reproduce. So let's see, we can get this next one. Okay, all of this is affected by land cover in the watershed, and Judy already explained what watershed is. But what some land cover is very conservative of both sediments and stormwater runoff, which means it will retain it. So the more wooded it is, the more density of roots, et cetera, you're going to have more infiltration of the water and interruption of runoff, which just carries nutrients and pollutants and everything directly into the stream. And usually in very large flows that can be very erosive. So, and then something that's, a Walmart parking lot isn't going to retain water at all, but it's not going to produce much sediment, but all the water that falls on it will run immediately into the stream, and it will carry all the pollutants that the cars parked on it have deposited. If you just clear the land of vegetation or have very minimal vegetation, it's not going to hold very much water, and it's not going to hold the sediment either. It's particularly noticeable in agricultural areas, not so much now with contour planting, but historically, the overgrazing or crops, et cetera, they would just denude the landscape, and that produced a lot of water and a lot of sediment. So this is just a 3-period look at changes in land cover. And I was looking at for a particular site on the gunpowder, a particular part of the watershed. But you have the pre-colonial, pre-1775 woodlands. Despite what most people think, that Native Americans controlled their landscape a great deal. They did a lot of understory burning. They also did lots of clearing for agriculture. So the runoff, which is in the first column of numbers here, this is in a runoff in inches, was fairly moderate, okay? But the sediment yield was 0.9 tons per acre per year, approximately. These are all done from models. Then from 1775 to 1901, there was a progression of agriculture. First was pasturing. Largely it was weedy stuff, and it would be just releasing pigs into the landscape and cows, et cetera. And that produced a lot more runoff because it removed a lot. They cleared the trees off, and they removed a lot of the ground cover. And that had a sediment yield of 8.3 tons per acre per year. Then as they got into more planting proper pastures and more conservative agricultural practices, they managed to increase the root density with grasses, and that reduced the runoff and also reduced the sediment yield. But it's still much more sediment than it would be under the pre-colonial period. Now the area that I'm talking about is, which is north of Pretty Boy, is all in forest. It's part of the forest reserve for Pretty Boy Reservoir. And so it's very well planted in trees, and it's a managed forest. The runoff has been reduced significantly to even less than it was in the pre-colonial period. And the sediment is the lowest possible too. So you just sort of see the change with land cover in both runoff depth and also sediment loads. This is this is known as the Lane's balance. I don't know what the exact term of it is, but it shows basically what happens in streams. Let me see if I can move this a little bit. So you can see the sediment on the left-hand side and water on the right-hand side. A stream is always going, in terms of its transport, is always going to want to work towards a balance. Okay, so it would look like this. Obviously, if I add more water, this arrow here will move into degradation, which means now there's more water flowing through the system, and it doesn't have more sediment to carry, so it's looking for work to do. So it will start to erode, and you'll get degradation of the channel. If I leave the water the same and just add a lot more sediment, that's going to perhaps be more than the water flow can carry. This needle here will move over to aggradation, which means you're going to start getting deposition of sediment. This can also be controlled by up here changes. You can move these things, obviously. You can move to a larger sediment size or a smaller sediment size. You can also change the slope of the stream to something flatter, to something steeper. So this sediment load times the sediment size is proportional to the stream slope times the stream discharge. That's the volume rate of flow. Okay. Whoops. A guy named Dave Roskin has come up with this system, which is also very well accepted, of a system of stream types, major stream types. And there's three things here. First is the dominant slope. As you see, as you go down, the slope gets flatter and then gets a little steeper. Okay, cross-sectional views of the stream channel. See, here it's narrow, here it's wide, here you might get multiple channels. This you don't tend to see more in the coastal plain, not in the Piedmont. Then much wider and shallower, and then what's basically a gully, sometimes be a gorge. And then you get the plan view, which is the change in sinuosity and the change in stream flow patterns, for instance, pools and riffles, runs, things like that, or multi-channels. So we're going to come back to this, and they all have letters. You find the A, double A, and A. would be in like, alpine streams or very steep rivers, and B, streams, and less steep rivers. C is very common for what you see around here in the agricultural areas. D and DA are multi-channel streams, and probably is what the gunpowder looked like in before we came in and started clearing things and killing all the beaver. That's probably what it looked like. So if you're really going to restore the gunpowder, you would probably restore it to something that looked like D or DA. E is the meandering, highly meandering stream. We often see those in the sort of near this ocean in marshes. F is a stream that has gotten too wide and too shallow. And G is a stream that has gotten way deeply incised in the landscape and has no longer any access to its floodplain. Okay. This is just to give you an example, a primitive example of what the stream cross-section looks like in an average stream that's in relatively good condition. You have your valley walls, then you have your floodplain areas, and you have a variety of different flows. You might have just your regular low flow or normal flow, but during a storm, you're going to have a bankful flow. In a stream that's performing properly, that will come up to the level of the floodplain. Okay, if it's any higher, it will go up onto the floodplain. The floodplain will slow down the flow and drop all the silt and debris on the floodplain, and also that will help with flooding downstream. But the bankful flow is considered the channel forming flow because it does the most work in the channel without overflowing. This is we're getting more into a specific geography here. This is the Chesapeake Bay watershed. You can see the physiographic provinces here, and you can see the coastal plain over here, the Piedmont here, and then you get up into the mountain areas, Blue Ridge, et cetera. There are many, many mills that were built historically in this area. And this is a map of mill density per square kilometer. And here's Maryland, here, Pennsylvania. And you can see that we have quite a high density of mills in the red and orange and yellow areas. And that really takes care of most of the Piedmont. It's lesser as you get down on the coastal plain, but there's still a fair amount. And these numbers over here are for the whole map, which you're not even seeing. So, but there are lots and lots of mills. This is just the mill dam sites that we know of in Baltimore County in 1857. And you can see there's an awful lot of them. And gunpowder paper mill, this is in this little area here. It would be this one here, north of the Pretty Boy. Here's Pretty Boy right here. Okay. And these are all discontinuities in the river continuum. So what do we do with these dams? Well, some of them are breached or partially breached. Some of them have been removed, but a lot of them just remain in the landscape, obstructing flow and sediment transport in the streams. So we're going to look specifically at what happens when you have a dammed creek or river, and then you remove the dam. So if you look at an A, which is plan form views, these and these over here, this is a creek that's been dammed, and you can see it's filled up with sediment, and then on top of that is the water that's impounded behind the dam. Okay, and this is what it looks like from a cross section under B, stage A. And then when you remove the dam, you're going to start having a dewatering. That's stage B. Stage C is the water will be all out, and it'll start to cut a channel, and that's stage C. And that cut is called a head cut. It will move upstream. As you can see here, it's moving upstream, and eventually it'll smooth out to some stable slope, and that would be stage D. But it's also getting wider. Okay, it's getting wider and deeper and longer. Stage E over here it's starting to aggrade. In other words, now sediments are starting to be deposited in the bottom of the stream, but it's still getting wider, the channel. And here in stage F is what they call quasi-equilibrium state. In other words, the channel is relatively narrow, the slope is stable, it's starting to form a floodplains in the bottom of the incision, in the bottom of the gully. This is not a restoration because all of this gray material here is still sediment that was deposited behind the dam, and they're called legacy sediments because they're legacies after a dam, and they're still in the landscape. And this is very prevalent in this entire area. We're going to look particularly at the gunpowder paper mill. This is what the mill looked like around 1890. You can see where the stream ran right through here. There still is a road here, the Gunpowder Road. And this is just above Pretty Boy. The flow would be in this direction, I believe, yes. Hard to tell. But you can see what the land cover was like. This was all thickly forested, probably in deciduous and some pines. And now it's, pretty much stripped of vegetation and probably overgrazed. Here, for instance, is an eroded scarp. Here's another eroded scarp. There are probably others here. So it's not a very stable hill slope. This is what the dam looked like. It was owned at that time by the Seitz family. It was a crib dam, log crib dam. Log crib dams, they get wet and dried, and as a result, they rot. And so they do fail. This one had failed, I think, in 1890 something, and they had rebuilt it immediately. But then, let's see. Here's somebody actually swimming in the impoundment. You can see the water's down a little bit because you're starting to have some shoreline that you can see. But this is circa 1932. And then 1932 was the great storm that actually is the same storm that wiped out the Connemara Dam in Johnstown and caused the horrible disaster at Johnstown. But it also took out this dam. Oh, wait a sec. Whoops. There it is. This is the dam's gone. And it's dewatered. This photo was taken 5 months after the dam breached. There's some minor incision in the sediments. All this flat grassy area is all legacy sediments that ran off the hillsides and deposited behind the dam. A minor incision has taken place, and in some places you can see that the banks are starting to slump into the channel. And there's nothing covering it but the herbaceous vegetation. This is what the modern channel looks like in about the same place. As you can see, it's very steep banks, very high banks. And this area up here never gets flooded, or over here, because it's just too high. So it hasn't changed too much, but it has changed channel type. Here it's a C, I think. It's actually starting to head cut up the valley. And here it's an F. It's gone through various processes. It's totally gone through all the other stages. And now it's an F. It's too wide, it's too shallow, and it has no access to a floodplain. Okay, it's what we call an incised stream channel. So that means the lateral connectivity has been totally cut off. Just to show you what these sediments can look like in profiles in the banks, this is actually not from the same place, but not that far away, but it shows it clearly. You can see all this column of sediments. That's all sediments. It's very fine material. It was deposited behind a dam. Then these dark black line here is the original floodplain surface, because that's organic material, whatever was lying on the floodplain that got buried. Then below that is anoxic soils. There's no oxygen in there, that can smell pretty bad. It also can be very clay. In fact, it's actually can be used to make ceramics. The gravel's here embedded in the bottom of the stream bank. would be the original channel before Europeans came in and removed all the land cover and built dams and stuff. And it probably meandered a bit, so it's, the stream channel wasn't probably exactly in the same place. Here's a bit of stream bank that has fallen in. And then you're getting to the new stream channel here, which is a bit lower. So this is all the stuff that can end up in the stream and will over time, and then will end up in the Chesapeake Bay. A lot of people out of Franklin Marshall University in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, done amazing amount of studies on this. This is, we're back here to the gunpowder mill. And that's actually, I think, maybe where the gunpowder came from. It was a paper mill. The dam right up the river, which is now, or down the river, which is now basically under the top of Pretty Boy Dam, called the Clipper, was the place that the paper was made for the first US currency. It was a rag paper, but they also made that stuff here. The breech dam was here. Then later it became, after it was a paper mill, it became a powder mill, and it blew up eventually. So the former dam was here. You see all this naked area here. That's all the tops of those legacy sediments with the channel cut down in between. You can see when you start getting up here that it's a much more normal looking channel, and there's no legacy sediments anymore. Well, there weren't probably ever any there. That's an ortho image from 2005. This is a LiDAR image done at the same time. And the breech dam is here. There's also a stream gauge here, which made doing this study a lot easier. But you can see the change in elevation. The very light pink is the lowest elevations, and then the reds up here are the higher elevations. But you can see that it's very much incised in these sediments here. And it's also being affecting the tributaries because they were all flooded too. And they're also now down cutting. So that will also progress upstream quite a way. Anyway, and all the time producing sediment. So that's really sort of the end, but I'm on the board of directors of the Gunpowder Valley Conservancy, and I'm also the chair for their land preservation committee. And we're looking for people who want to join us. They can join us for, they can volunteer. We have many, if you want to get outdoors and plant trees, help design rain gardens, install rain barrels, etc. We love to have volunteers come out and do it. We're all very COVID sensitive and make sure you're safe. We also, if you know of anybody or you yourself is interested, in putting your property into conservancy, permanent easement, we're always looking for people in the Gunpowder watershed, which is Baltimore County, a little bit of Carroll County, and a little bit of Harford County, and also York County, Pennsylvania, but we don't do easements there. Anyway, so thank you. This is what the gunpowder looks like upstream, where it's not been damaged by the legacy sediments at all. So that's what it should all look like. So that's how you get into house channels that are formed, how we affect them with our human activities in the watershed, and what the long-term impacts are. To remember that from 1932 to 2004, when I was studying those impoundment sediments behind the gunpowder paper mill dam, it hasn't changed all that much. It's gotten wider, but essentially it's still an incised stream. And that a lot of that has to do with the clay nature of the soils. They don't erode all that easily. And so a lot of it's still there. So when will it ever go back to normal? It's possible it never will. And the only other option would be to do some kind of engineered restoration. That's it.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned beavers at one point.
Mhm.
Are there beavers in the gunpowder now?
Yes,
Should we
there are.
go back, or I
There
read-
are some. if you go up the NCR, tourist rail trail, up more towards Parkton in that area, you tend to see, you can see beaver installations and the wetlands that they've created. But it probably was all like that with multiple channels until we came in and got rid of all the beavers. So
You have some people with their hands raised. Gat or Joe? Oh, John.
Actually, it's John. How you
hi,
doing?
Don.
Hi, Deborah. Am I on? Yeah.
Yes.
You talked about engineered restoration. What has there actually been some of that happening, and what type of restoration would they do in these sediment filled areas?
There's not been done any at this site, and I personally wouldn't recommend it because of how much good ecological land you would destroy getting in there. But yes, it's been done a lot. Land studies, and I think they're out of Lidditz, Pennsylvania. They've done a lot of very interesting things. They've gone in, they've slowly dewatered the stream, so you don't want to. A lot of times they blow up the dam, which is all very fun, but all that sediment gets just flushed downstream, which destroys the ecology habitat downstream with a lot of fine sediment. So it'll ruin macroinvertebrate and fish habitat. But if you dewater it slowly and then remove the sediments, Land Studies has had some experience on the Conewago of taking the sediments, which are full of nutrients. You want to make sure they're not full of something bad you don't want, like heavy metals or something. But you can actually put it back up on the farmer's fields where it came from, and he won't have to fertilize for a while because he's getting all his nutrients back, or a lot of them. And then what happens is they remove the sediments down to the old floodplain, and they really don't have to do much because there's a lot of buried seed banks in there from hundreds of years ago that are still viable, and native species will grow up on the damp floodplains, and it's really quite amazing. So, but that involves also, making sure the channel that develops through the sediments has the right morphology, the right slope, the right width depth ratio to handle whatever range of discharges that's going to come to it without actually damaging it. And that's very expensive. When you start moving dirt, the price just shoots through the ceiling.
Paige?
Well, you mentioned beavers used to be plentiful, not so much now, but I remember up near Parkton on the Gunpowder once seeing some otters swimming.
Mhm.
I wonder if they're still around, or what other wildlife you still find on the Gunpowder.
There still are otters. They're just very shy animals. They're hard to see. Beavers are easier to see. A lot of these, there's good trout fishing opportunities. If it's brook trout or brown trout, it's probably an indication that the waters are in good quality and that there's decent habitat. And most of the Gunpowder in Maryland is a fish take and put back fishery. You have to put them back. So, and there are native brook trout breeding in there.
Debbie?
I was, you showed a map of the mills along the Gunpowder, and I was surprised at how populous the mills were. It seems like, was that where everybody was employed? And what type of mills were they? All paper mills?
Oh boy, there's so many different kinds. Grist mills, obviously. Sawmills were probably the first ones because they were trying to build things, houses and stuff. Grist mills, planing mills, fulling mills, which is how you make felt. Oh, geez. And then often they also were sometimes used for industrial processes later on. So manufactories of various sorts. But there were tons and tons of them, all sizes. And these are only the ones that we know about. I went to study a dam that I knew was on somebody's property, and went up to him and asked him if I could, walk on his property and do some surveying for his dam. And he didn't know he had a dam, even though a great deal of the structure is still there, beautiful stonework. And then when I was down there following the channel up from the dam I knew was there, I came to the next dam, which was only maybe 1,000 feet above, because often they would build a dam and then realize they didn't have enough water. So then they would build a bigger dam downstream, which would flood the upper dam, so they could have a bigger pool to work from. So a lot of those people don't even know they're there on their very own properties. So.
Amazing. Okay, well, it's about 11:15, and if there's no more questions, we'll say thank you, Deborah.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank everybody for all their interesting comments and questions in the class. And we will adjourn until your 11 o'clock class.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Judy.
Judy, this has
Thank
been a
you.
terrific class.
Thank you.
Great course.
Wonderful class.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Again, Judy, wonderful class.